Pro tip from your favorite content creator, your #1 favorite YouTuber: never eat cashew nuts right before you start recording. Your mouth will be dry and sticky. Hi, hello and welcome back. Welcome back to another Onkruid video. Today, another should you read, little book review type thing, you all know the deal. And it's about the book by Nicci, Grieve, or the Dutch title is Verlies. I always make my videos, or strive to make them at least, in complete English, fully in English, to strive to appeal to a broader audience. But right now, that was not really an option because, and that's one of the things I will talk about, I believe this book was only published in Dutch. Do I think you should read it? Yes. Yeah, sure. But it's only in Dutch. And an additional but, it might contain some triggering themes. And if you're not really into the kind of stuff that gets discussed in this book, or you feel like it will really trigger something in yourself from potentially past trauma or anything like that, you might not want to pick it up. What those themes are exactly will become more apparent later on in the video, of course. Now, if like me, you're an uncultured swine, you didn't even realize that Nicci is not really just one name. It's a husband and wife duo. Made up of Nicci Gerard and Sean French, seen on the slide right here, right below me. It's mirrored, so I had to think about that for a second. They wrote this captivating short story in 2002, so that's 20 years ago already. Time really goes by fast. And they wrote it for Thriller Month, or Maand van het Spannende Boek, which is basically the same in Dutch. It's really a short little story. This is the book right here. And not only is it small in size, but it's not thick at all. My copy contained just 133 pages. As you can or maybe cannot see because the camera is not really cooperating, but I picked it up for only 50 cents in a second-hand store right here in Leuven. And an afternoon filled with pleasure just for 50 cents, that's a great deal. Something your mom last night. You already know my branch of humor, you know I would come up with some stupid shit about that. There's a medium spoiler alert in action from this point onwards. I mean, it's a really short story, so if I want to talk about the contents in any way, I'm probably gonna reveal something about the plot points. It's a disturbing psychological thriller story. It's about a couple named Stella and Rick, Stella being the female person and Rick being the male person, and they have 2 children. One child is 5 years old and one child is 10 years old. Now the 5-year-old child's name is Rory, and I say he is 5 years old, but more suiting to the story would be he was 5 years old. The book starts in medias res, so in the middle of the action, right when the child's funeral is going on. They don't immediately explain what happened, what's going on. No, it's just bam, the child is dead, deal with it. They only actually explain what happened to the little creature like about 50 pages in the book, or like, well, almost at the halfway mark. And it's also accompanied with a nice twist ending that ties into the fate of the child, but that twist ending only gets revealed all the way at the end of the book. And I didn't see it coming this time, and I'm really a sucker for twist endings that I don't see coming. Another thing I never see coming is my sexual partner. Haha, high five. Now, what in my opinion the title is actually about, and what is like the main core theme of the book, is an insight into the prolonged processes of grief, the changes in these processes, the feelings of guilt, the paranoid feelings of guilt, like who actually did this and how the characters in the book develop them towards each other, towards themselves, towards people that you would have never thought could be involved in the death of the child. You don't necessarily think that a parent is gonna kill his own child, right? So it's really like, it's eerie. It can make your skin crawl. And guilt is really central here. Guilt towards the child they lost, which they share. Guilt towards themselves. Guilt towards their other child who is left behind now. Guilt towards each other. And the book is also an intense illustration of how all of this ties into relationships and what kind of a strain an experience like this can put on your relationship, which was otherwise pretty stable. And additionally, also on the attachment of their second child. I mean, of course it has an impact if you lose your younger sibling. All of a sudden the house is a lot more empty, your parents might have a lot more attention for you. It's just like a life-changing experience, and it's gonna change the way you feel about your caretakers and your primary care figures. And that's exactly what attachment is all about, by the way. It says individual differences in processing, by the way. I noticed that my man Sean is blocking the word right there a little bit. Now for the pros, and as you can see, I'm totally not biased in which pro I found the most intriguing. It's not the one in a bright color that is way larger than all the other ones. No, not at all. It actually is though. But first of all, a pro that might not seem that beneficial for your reading enjoyment to some of you, but I found the book misleading and confusing in a beneficial manner. The author or the authors put you on all kinds of wrong tracks. They mislead you, and after a while you have no idea who to believe or trust anymore. You're starting to wonder yourself, like, what happened to this damn child? Who is responsible? How could something like this have happened? You will alternate between suspecting every single player in the story, and I think that lends itself really well to a kind of psychological thriller turned into murder or just suicide mystery. Just whatever is happening inside your head is not that clear anymore while you're reading this book, and I think that brain fog really is great. You lose your own thoughts, your train of thoughts, your belief, your narrative coherence in your head, and you do that together with the people in the story, and I think it really helps with feeling empathy towards the players in the story. Some of the unannounced time jumps where you are just weeks in the future after turning a page, for example, also really help in this pro. And then the second one. This book really features some beautiful descriptions, analogies, metaphors, explanation of concepts, and just trains of thoughts or opinions about mental health and mental health care, in my opinion. And I am a clinical psychologist, so I'm really a sucker for those kinds of things. An example is the author saying, therapy makes unbearable pain bearable. It turns ghosts inside your head into memories. Oh, when I read that line, that was exactly when I knew, alright, I'm gonna make a video on this book and this is gonna be one of the pros. It turns ghosts in your head into memories. I think that's powerful, and it's true. It's truthful as well. I don't want to say that memories can't elicit any unwanted effects on your mental health state, even your physical health state, but you can hear the difference. You can hear the difference in ghosts versus memories, right? Ghosts are things that really don't go away. You'd have no control over them. They are unwanted, they are unhealthy, they keep haunting you, they won't leave you alone. Whereas memories is something we all know. It's something inside of our head, it's something recognizable, it's something everybody has, it's something controllable. You can learn to control your memories, even when they are of a traumatic kind. I also found it very intriguing. This is a bit further out there, but it's still related to mental health care, and this is a bit of a spoiler, but I loved it when the therapist decided to take fate into her own hands. She went to Stella behind Rick's back while Rick was in therapy with her, because the therapist suspected Rick of actually being kind of guilty in some way, shape or form. And I think that was just like, that was crazy. That was unexpected, and especially for someone like me who has learned about all these things, it's such a clear-cut case of infringement of privacy and of safety, of secrecy, of security, and those concepts are all so important in our job. So I hope that it doesn't happen all that often in real life, but I'm afraid it might do. Not necessarily about crazy intense things like murder or losing your child or anything, but I think it happens a lot. People are lenient with the secrecy privileges that normally accompany a therapeutic relationship. And also, after going to therapy, it's described how Rick all of a sudden becomes this very talkative person. He spews his feeling out on the kitchen table. He really gives himself naked and afraid and vulnerable. And that's something they would normally never do. It's stated that the therapist opens up the gates that Rick would otherwise have closed forever. And that's, oh man. Look at those therapists go. We can do that stuff. I shouldn't say we therapists because I'm not a therapist yet, but well, whatever. It's my channel, it's my video, it's my reality. Reality can be whatever I want. I think the book also raises some valuable questions and some valid questions. It really put some thinking matter into my brain. It gave me some topics to think about. And one of the main topics there is it normal for a wife to feel jealous or envious of a female therapist that is seeing her husband? Especially when that husband talks about, oh yeah, and with her I could talk about these things and these things and these things, and you realize that he never talks about any of those things with you. And then more importantly, and even more interestingly, is it really a bad idea to talk with your spouse about what happens in therapy? Not only about how it's going or the effects it has on you, but maybe even about the contents in the session. It's something the main characters in our book really steer clear of. They don't want to have anything to do with that. The therapy is something that Rick is going through. He is experiencing it, he is trying to learn about himself from it, and Stella is just like on the sideline watching. She's not involved or anything. And is that the right approach? And that was a really important question for me because I am like 99% sure that it's a question that will come up later in my professional life. A person with a partner that I have in care, that I have a care relationship with, that I am trying to help, they are probably going to ask me like, what should I say about this at home? Do I talk about everything that has happened? Do I give a one-on-one account of every single word that we exchanged today? Or do I kind of make a summary of the general lines of what we discussed today? Do I not talk about it at all? Is it just something private for me? And yeah, it's a process that really got me thinking, and I'm gonna have to clear that up before I actually go into the work field myself. I would not advise them to give a word-for-word account of what happens in the therapy sessions. In some level, it's still an individual, personal process, and some privacy is warranted. You're discovering yourself. It might involve relationships. You might even talk about the other persons, but you don't need to reveal everything that has happened in therapy. Because then if you have that thought beforehand, like, oh, I'm gonna have to talk about this to my spouse later, you won't say everything that really comes to mind, which is very important. And then finally, the third pro, and pretty much a bit related to the second one, is alcohol as coping is portrayed realistically, disturbingly, but also in an understandable manner. You can realize the benefits it serves for Rick to kind of dive into his risky habits. And this ties into the beautiful description in general on a more macro level that this book entails of differences in grieving processes, and that everybody has their own thoughts about what correct grieving is. Not only do they do it in a different manner, but they also have different opinions about the other person's grief. Is he doing it correctly? Is she not showing too much emotions? Is he not shielding his emotions from the outside world too much? And that can breed conflicts, of course. That can really elicit conflicts. If you think your partner is being too pent up about his anger and about his sadness, and you want to try and release it from him, you want to get it loose, you want to open the gates, your partner might keep them even more shut and keep you out as far as possible. You have to give each other time. It's a very individual process, as I said. It's very idiosyncratic, if that's a word in English as well. But not everything can always be beautiful, of course. There are some cons as well. Although I had to kind of search the depths of my mind to find some of these. A first con, pretty obvious, it's really short. It's a short story, pun intended. So, I mean, it's not a world you can get involved in and lose multiple reading days into. If you can only pay 50 cents for it, it provides enough enjoyment to warrant that price, that's for sure. The twist in the story comes a bit late. It feels like, okay, yeah, there's this big unexpected reveal and that's cool and all, but there isn't much room left in the book to really explore then what the effects or the consequences of this reveal, this revelation are. The book ends quite abruptly. It'll still fuck you up though. The twist is really gut-wrenching. The suspense when the main players in the story realize what is going on, when the culprit actually confesses, all that leading up to that building up process to that climax, that's rough. Is this one of the pros or the cons? Because it feels like I'm just really being very positive about the twist ending. To make it more into a con, I must say that when I now look back at the twist with a more clear mind and not being in the middle of the story, in the middle of the action, it's not that believable. It's a bit out there. It might leave some plot holes behind on careful inspection. A con that I found online, because I haven't read much from the author, I think this might be the first, maybe the second book, but not sure, is that it is a bit less in-depth than some of the other psychological books Nicci French previously wrote together. If you're just starting out your journey with this author pair, it might be warranted to kind of buy 2 books at once, or to lend 2 books at once from the library. Maybe this one and then another one that kind of seems a bit bigger and has more room for real psychological analysis and stuff like that. That way you will be better equipped to explore the full extent of their literary spectrum. This video is not sponsored by a publishing company, by the way. It's only sponsored by my love for reading and exploring everything an author and a book has to offer. The con in red, which is in my opinion the biggest con, the thing I dislike the most about the book, is that the characters feel like they're living in a void sometimes. There's so much attention given to the psychology and the mind and the internal experiences of these characters in these 133 pages that there's not much room left to kind of discover or describe the world around them. There's not that much room for world building, there's not that much description of the scenery, they don't really look into the side characters or anything, it's just focused on the main protagonist and it really has a tunnel vision on those people. And then the final con is availability. I feel like really it might have only been published in Dutch, so so it's gonna be hard to find for you if you are not proficient at reading that language. If you do ever find it for a low price somewhere and you can read it, cop it on the cheap. You won't regret your purchase, I think. Think of the possibilities that you might get triggered, or think of that before you read the book, because it's quite heavy sometimes. Child trauma, loss of a child, PTSD, alcohol addiction. There's even a scene with some questionable sexual practices. I'm not going to go too much in depth, but if you feel that rings a bell already, like, oh, that's a no-go zone, maybe skip this one. I love books that portray some mental health themes in a profound manner, and this book is a great example of that, in describing of how couples deal with grief, the impact on their relationship, attachment, trauma, grieving, processing, PTSD events, sharing guilt over losing a child that you really loved. It drags you along, the book. You want to finish it in one go, and that's exactly what I did. Or maybe in 2 goes, possibly 2 goes. Either way, a short read. Read it if you find it and if you can. And hope to see you in the next one as always. Bye bye.